this place. Right of the full moon.
No more.
No escape, my love. I call to you.
You're dead.
Right of the full.
Welcome everybody, we are back with some Path of Exile 2 0.3 and the first official league in early access launched just about a week ago. And it's given us a good chance and a reason to come back to our roots with the Witch Hunter. So we have the Witch Hunter and the trusty crossbow. We should just start out by saying if you haven't played for a while, and especially if you haven't kept up with the 0.3 patch notes, the crossbow in general just feels a lot better. So I think you know, if you like the weapon but it felt a little clunky, you should definitely give it a shot no matter which class you're playing. The Witch Hunter also got small changes. I mean, it's a big change, but only one big change on the ascendancy. And that is, of course, the fact that now you can turn your entire passive tree into 2 separate weapon set skill points. So you can turn all of them into weapon set skill points. So you can see in the top right, you theoretically can use up to 124. Of course, that's the total passive points you'll ever get. So it's not like you can exceed that, but you can split it entirely instead of only, I believe it was 48 before that. The idea for this was, you know, we're coming back in. We wanted to ease ourselves back into the game, so let's start with something that we know works, and that's going to be Galvanic Shards for mapping. And then we had high velocity rounds, which got a nice change coming into 0.3, and that's the fact that it no longer consumes the armor break. The full armor break as a debuff to do extra damage, but instead it applies its own debuff. And this is kind of like Impale. So basically when you hit someone that has fully broken armor, then you store 5% of the high velocity round damage pre-mitigation, and then subsequent attack hits against the target will gain unscalable added physical damage equal to that magnitude. So basically, they specified this in the video as well. But even if your skill, let's say fragmentation rounds, can technically combine all of it, so technically it can shotgun its damage, right? Combine all of the pellets into one hit in terms of damage calculation. Since it is still 10 fragments per shot as it's specified, if you are hitting with all 10, then in theory, each shot of fragmentation rounds afterwards, after Revan Armor, would apply 50% of the high velocity round damage versus armor broken. So that's pretty nice. I tinkered with a bunch of different ways to do this, you know, using just Galvanic Shards, trying to maybe do it with like a rapid fire type deal. But for now, I think we're just going to go with the most basic thing. It is not the most optimized, and in terms of gear as well, there's still a little bit more upgrades in terms of gems or gear that I would like. But overall, it's getting through, you know, 15s, tier 15s just fine. Tier 16s is fine too. The bosses are slightly slower. And then I'm starting to creep into some of the other endgame bosses for the different league mechanics as well. Okay, so let's talk about the setup. Basically, for mapping, it's the tried and true combo. You're going to go with Galvanic Shards. You have, not Voltaic Mark, you have Herald of Thunder as well. And on that tree, you are going to have a bunch of all the elemental damage and whatnot. So that's the bulk of it. You know, every now and then, if need be, you can weave in the Voltaic Grenades. You know, maybe you've got some crazy mods on a rare that's a bit tankier, or you're getting overwhelmed and you're trying to reload. So the Voltaic Grenades come in handy there as well. And outside of that, that's really all you need. You just need to be walking around with your Galvanic Shards, and you reload, and then you keep going. So let's talk about the reload and the support gems, because we're using a new support gem. The Lineage support gem, it's a new series of support gems that came in for 0.3. Ratha's Assault, this basically means you can't reload it normally. You always have to dodge roll to reload, but you will always reload when you dodge roll. But it also basically increases the maximum number of bolts you can have. This is important because Galvanic Shards was changed this season into normally having only 1 bolt. It is no longer an auto shotgun, it is just a regular shotgun that does lightning damage. They bumped up the damage to compensate for that. I actually think it's a buff, I think it's a better change, but now you have other support gems to circumvent that. So normally you would only be able to fire 1, but now, if you dodge roll, you can have up to 4, because it's 3 additional. Now, every time you dodge roll, you only reload 3, but you should never really need 4 in a row when you're mapping, because this should be melting pretty much all normals and rares for sure, or normals and magics for sure, and then some rares, might take a little bit more depending on distance and the mods that they have. But also, if they're in packs, you have a bunch of things that interact with each other, whether it's the Galvanic Shards with the beams, the Herald of Thunder, and then, of course, the Witch Hunter Ascendancy AoE as well. After that, it's pretty straightforward. Lightning Attunement for the extra lightning damage. You've got Elemental Armament 2 for the extra, basically, lightning damage. And then you have Rapid Attacks 2, just because, try to get that feeling a little bit of the older one. And also, sometimes if you're going to need 2 or 3 bolts fired, then just get through that and then dodge roll right away from it. And then Fork. Now, this obviously lessens the damage a little bit, but I've separated basically our 2 trees. We've got our mapping tree and mapping skill set on one weapon set, and then the other weapon set's going to be the bossing. And so you can still stick with Fork. It's going to be fine. Obviously, you could still go the old Shock Burst route as well to combo with that for bossing. So Fork is just going to guarantee that you're full screen clearing. To go with that, Herald of Thunder, of course, is a key part of it. So Herald of Thunder also buffed up, although I think, quite frankly, how fast you're clearing things, the quality percent here isn't really going to matter. But you can have whatever extra, basically, aura/buff you want attached to this. You can have enough Spirit to add a couple support gems under Herald of Thunder that will increase the Spirit cost just a little bit and still have Wind Dancer available. So you can kind of pick and choose. We're going with the accuracy just to make sure it's, fully capped out. I'll probably be switching this out soon, though. And then Deadly Herald, so it does more damage. Once again, Elemental Armament 2, because now you can double dip into support gems, which is great. And then Concentrated Area for extra damage. The specifics here won't matter too much, but, pick and choose what you want. You probably won't be able to really tell what difference it's making anyway, as long as it does some extra damage. Now, worst case scenario, sometimes you might need Voltaic Grenades as you're going through. Maybe you've got a rare with a bunch of different mods that's totally cooked up and juiced up that you can't just burn through immediately. Maybe they've got, some sort of mod that makes them unkillable, right? They've got the aura, the Invuln aura, things like that. So you need to create some space. Voltaic Grenades, again, good AoE. It has electrocution. It'll instant electrocute basically any rare mob. Bosses are not instant. You still need a little bit more build-up. But with the grenades, you have multi-shot 2, so 2 additional projectiles. Living Lightning, this is kind of nice just because if you just use it once and then you're running around, these will continue to do extra damage as well, so you just kind of weave it in every now and then. I put Short Fuse 2 in because while it does less damage, again, for the regular mobs, it's getting all the job done, and I just want to be able to, apply it instantly. This makes it so that when you fire, it just immediately explodes. Now, this does mean that they can't go as far, so you can't, launch it and have it bounce away. But basically, I am waiting, or I'm using this when I'm in close range. Second Wind, again, just to make sure that I can really stack on the electrocution when I need for bossing. And then Lightning Mastery, just for a little bit extra damage. Now, on the other side of things, those are basically the bulk of things that we're using on when we're mapping and on our the first weapon set. I am using the same weapon both sides. I mean, if you really wanted to nitpick, you could probably get a pure physical weapon for the second set and then one that has pure lightning damage on the first set. You can probably tinker with that, but right now this is suitable. It does need an upgrade given where I'm at right now, so that'll be the next step. Now, for the second weapon set, we have Armor Piercing Rounds. So that's always going to be the first combo. If you look down at my skill bar here, it's always going to be in order. So you have Armor Piercing Rounds, Shred the Armor. Once it's fully broken, we go with the High Velocity round, get that burst, get the damage in, and then we swap to the Shotgun and the Fragmentation rounds, and you just go at it. Armor Piercing Rounds. Armor Piercing Rounds we are using just to break armor. We're not looking to do damage with this. And so we're going to use another new support gem, Uryx Smelting, which makes it so that when you fully break armor with this skill, they now take permanently increased 2% physical damage, up to 20%. Most likely, other than really late game Ubers and things like that, you probably shouldn't ever get to 20%. I think the max I've gotten to is 6%. On some of the bosses that I've tried, but basically, on our first cycle, it already guarantees us 2% extra damage. And then if we need to go through another cycle, it's 4%. It's not huge, but it is what it is. But the bigger part here is that this also means that it's breaking 70% more armor. And for those of you who don't know, armor-piercing rounds actually breaks flat armor. It's not based on the damage you do like it is for pretty much everything else in the game. So this skill itself comes with flat armor break. So, you know, 70% on that is going to be amazing. And of course, we have the quality here, which for this one, it does matter because, again, it's a percent increase in how much armor you're breaking. Then we have Rapid Attacks 3. Now, this is important because we're not ever going to use Rapid Attacks 3, level 3, on any other skill. You want to stop at 2 for most skills because once you get to 3, you lose 50% damage. You're only getting, I believe, like 10 or 15% more attack speed. Let's take a look here, actually. You're getting 10% more attack speed and losing 50% more damage. When it comes to Rapid Attacks 3. So you don't want it anywhere else. But again, we're not looking to do damage. We just want to get that armor broken ASAP. So we put Rapid Attacks 3 in here because, again, it's flat armor break, so it doesn't get affected. Then we have Blind. Now, this is there just because we're trying to tinker with some different support gems. I mean, you know what? You might as well just make sure that you get another debuff on there. There's some interactions. I don't believe I have it set up anymore. Yeah, but I might be adding a support gem here to tinker with that. And then ammo conservation. I've never really needed this, but, you know, just in case, especially for super late game, it might be helpful. You could just add in more damage, honestly. You know what? I should probably add in more damage here. I should probably put in brutality or something like that. But afterwards, you go to high velocity rounds. This is where things get a little bit interesting, because we're going to have Garakon's Resolve. So this has an interesting thing. So it sounds a little complicated, but bifurcated critical hits basically means that you get to fish for your crits, right? So you can go for an extra roll, but also if instead of just being the same as lucky, if you succeed in both rolls for the crit, it also applies the critical damage bonus twice. So you can hit the jackpot and get a massive, massive boost. And also, if you have other lucky stats to your crit chance, then it applies to both rolls anyway, so it's amazing. The only caveat to this is that you cannot use it until you've moved for 20 meters. So if you watch here, we're going to fire this. We're going to swap to high velocity rounds. We're going to fire. And then if I go to armor piercing rounds, I'm pressing E. I can't switch back to high velocity rounds until I've walked 20 meters, and then it'll load it in. So that does hurt a little bit, but again, the way we're using it, we're always going to be kind of cycling through it anyway. Then we got Deliberation. This is kind of the slot that I'm debating. I might put in a different support gem that can interact with the blind and do extra damage. But, you know, it just gets you 20% more damage. Brutality, of course, if you're going for a physical skill, is the go-to. 30% more physical damage. I don't know if this whole ignore enemy physical damage reduction is really going to matter since we're always using this against fully armor broken, but I guess there could be enemies that have like default damage reduction against physicals, so that's good to have in there as well, but there's no downside to having level 3 anyway for brutality. And then we're trying to fish for crits here on high velocity rounds. So inevitable critical, this will give you a little bit more of a chance to get those, and then pinpoint critical automatically gives you 60% more. Then we go to fragmentation rounds. So fragmentation rounds, we're going to try using streamlined rounds. Now streamlined rounds basically makes any skill kind of like the old Galvanic Shards. So normally you'd have to shoot, right? And then like reload somewhere in the middle. With streamlined rounds, now you can load 5 additional bolts. It has 50% more attack speed, but it does a lot less damage, and it's a lot slower on the reload as well. So if you watch, right, we're getting through it, and then let's say we used it all, you reload, look at your character almost looks like they're in slow-mo. So it's a little bit painful, but we'll get to that. We'll remedy that. Don't worry about it. I have tinkered with this. Honestly, I think you can kind of pick and choose what feels better for you. Like, you could put in Wrath's Assault here, and you could just go with Double Barrel 3, but I'll explain why we're doing this in just a little bit. Brutality 3 once more. Heft for just the extra physical hit damage. I have the Impale on here. I'm not sure if Impale works in the same way like Riven Armor does, where every fragment will add in Impale. with those stacks. I mean, it doesn't really matter because I guess then the damage would be lower on what's being stored by Impale. And then ammo conservation. This one does matter for ammo conservation because you have 6 maximum now with streamlined rounds. But with ammo conservation plus a couple on your tree, if you get lucky, you could go forever. So that's good to know. So with the slower reload speed, how are we getting around that? Well, that's where emergency reload comes in. Emergency reload now reloads all of your crossbow ammunition clips. It should be noted, if you have 2 separate weapon sets, it automatically loads everything tied to that weapon set you're using when you're using emergency reload. And so I do have it available on both. If you're scared of messing it up, it might honestly be okay to just change it to the weapon set that you have on your physical set so that it only reloads those. This is pretty straightforward. Cooldown reduction, higher duration since you get the damage buff as well, right? Emergency reload buffs all the bolts on that weapon set with 30% more damage, and it just reloads them to full. And then we have efficiency, but you know, that's kind of a non-issue. So that's how we get around the slow reload speed. And what I mean is we're trying to do damage with fragmentation rounds off of the base damage, but also the Riven armor that comes through from high velocity rounds. So basically, you have 2 options. You can armor break, high velocity rounds, and then go for your fragmentation rounds. And either after it's used all of it, or you know, if you want to just try to maximize it, you can figure out the timing after like 2 seconds or such, where you press emergency reload. Now you have full empowered bolts in, I mean, everything, but mainly your fragmentation rounds, and then you can go through all 6 of it again if you get lucky, maybe a couple more. So that's the idea. The other option, we're going to wait for the emergency reload cooldown to come back, but the other option for emergency reload is what you could do is, let's make sure we have high velocity rounds available. You could armor break, and then instead try to rely on the fact that you're going to fish for bolts not being consumed on fragmentation rounds, and use emergency reload now. Switch to high velocity, use that's going to be empowered, and then go through your fragmentation rounds. You see that the debuff already ended by the time we fired around 6 rounds anyway. So this way, you're getting more damage stored on your Riven armor because even your high velocity rounds will have the 30% empowered hit. I do think that's probably the ideal way to do it, but depending on the boss and the boss health, it might be theoretically quicker to just get regular high velocity rounds and then go through fragmentation rounds, and when they're like, you know, let's say they're at like 40% health or whatever, you can emergency reload and just finish them off instead of having to go through another cycle. That option is there, but also if it's kind of that amount of health anyway, let's say the debuff runs out because you used it before high velocity rounds, you could just switch back to Galvanic Shards to finish them off, because that'll still do decent damage. So I did forget one thing. We didn't talk about Voltaic Mark. Voltaic Mark, it just increases your chance to shock, but also increases the magnitude of shock. So this is nice right at the start of the boss. Just put the mark down, and then you throw out your voltaic grenades. You know, if you need, you add a little bit more shock, and this will make your shock do 50% extra damage for everything that follows. So that is nice. I am wondering if I change this to Sniper's Mark, though, because we're not using this when we're mapping. We're not using it for the explosion. That is totally irrelevant to us. So I might change this to Sniper's Mark in the future. Let's talk about the passive tree a little bit. Now, this version isn't going to utilize the full 100, split or anywhere close to that. It'll still be more than 48, so this wouldn't have been possible before. I don't think this is going to be the most ideal or optimal way to use this ascendancy node, but I wanted to test things out with something that, we're all a bit more familiar with. So, first off, we're going to try to secure enough defenses for ourselves with our main passive tree that's shared across both. So we go to Feel No Pain. We actually go for cat-like agility here, especially because if you're going to be dodge rolling a lot, because that's how you reload, you're going to have this all the time. Get the extra move speed here as well. You make sure you get all of the two-hand buffs here. When you're leveling, we go for Colossal Weapon to get the extra strength as well. And also, I leveled with grenades. I tried to switch to Galvanic Shards early. I do think right now for early leveling, it's a little rough because it's only 1 bolt now, so it's a little clunky unless you get more support gems. So I just leveled with grenades. Grenades for sure work for leveling, so that's probably the way to do it. But eventually I switched off of this because we don't really need the area of effect, nor do we need the extra strength. Then you come all the way down here. We're going to get the extra evasion on this side. And we're dipping as much as we can into pure evasion because we're trying to utilize the new deflection. How good really is it? I'm not sure. Considering that I feel like I should have died a lot more than I should have, I think it's working okay. So we have the deflection clusters here, right? You get a little bit more deflection. You can prevent some of the deflection itself. And then we actually went for this armor invasion cluster here as well. Now this one's interesting. This was a new cluster that's added as well. But you gain extra stun threshold, which I think is very nice. But then also, you can either become immune to bleeding or immune to poison. So the easiest way to do this is you're going to just become immune to bleeding, because if you want any amount of stun threshold added, you're going to need to get a hybrid helmet, and usually most of those by default, you're going to have higher armor than evasion. So this is a way where you can get immunity to bleeding, right? If you went with a pure evasion helmet, you would get immunity to poison. And if you went with a pure evasion helmet, you can, forget strong chin and go this route with insulated treads, where you can get hybrid boots, right? And then you can just get ailment threshold in that sense as well. I like the stun threshold. I think it's just a nice safety net. If you do get hit, at least you're not getting stunned or locked or, canceled. On the main tree, we come down and we get all the way up to reusable ammunition, because that way our galvanic shards and fragmentation rounds both might have a good chance of not consuming a bolt if you reloaded recently. So that will be quite helpful. And then also you just get the default damage with the crossbows. We also get half of this giant slayer cluster. So we're going to get the attack damage, right? Against rare and unique enemies, the extra damage and accuracy and ailments against rare and unique enemies. But then the attack speed and such we will separate into a separate tree because we don't need that on our elemental tree, our lightning tree. So the color's a little hard to see here, but on my POV I kind of mixed it up. So we'll just look at it in game. So the orange, the weirdly orange bronze looking tree, that's going to be our weapon set 1. And that is, of course, our lightning tree. So that's all the stuff that you're used to seeing. You get all the lightning nodes here. You get lucky with the lightning damage. You get all of the elemental nodes here, the penetration, the chance to shock, and electrocution, because you're going to be using galvanic shards with this one. We just went ahead and topped these off because we've been shifting our trees a little bit, but the extra damage helps. I do have the movement speed, especially if you've killed recently on this tree, right? Because on our other tree, we're only ever using the physical tree really for bosses. I've had to use it on rares every now and then, but not really. So that would be a waste to be shared across, but that's where we'll have that tree. You make that tree go all the way across the nodes here, get the extra elemental damage here, and then you start working on all of these other shock and electrocution nodes. We don't have this one yet with the shock duration, but that'll be a nice safety net in the future. You go all the way through here, electrocution buildup. That'll especially be nice for bosses, but this basically guarantees, again, for normals, magics, and even rares, that you're instantly applying electrocution, basically stunning them. That also means that that's why we don't have flash grenades in, because we don't need that safety net. It gives you the extra resistance. And then extra lightning damage when you have Herald of Thunder, which we're going to have on all the time. So now let's look at the green lines, which is a little easier to distinguish. The green lines, the first and foremost, you're going for that extra armor break and extra physical damage, right? So this cluster, which has been changed a little bit, so we can get extra break. And then you go all the way here for the extra two-hand damage, again, trying to maximize the high point of high velocity rounds. Lower attack speed doesn't really matter. We've got so much attack speed on armor-piercing rounds anyway, and high velocity rounds isn't going to be impacted by that. And then we have the damage against low life enemies, because again, we're just cycling through mostly our physical weapons only, and then every now and then throwing the galvanic shards and maybe 1 or 2 rounds of galvanic shards for the shock and electrocution debuffs. So you have damage against low life enemies here with the physical tree. We're trying to maximize our projectile damage with the physical tree here. And then we come down to the bottom. So we start to stack as much crit as we can find. So you get this critical cluster here. These have extra crit and accuracy as well, so that's nice. This gives you the attack speed, so it covers a little bit of the attack speed lost elsewhere on the tree for things like the fragmentation rounds, the shotgun. Increased Culling Strike threshold, because we are using the Culling Strike nodes on the ascendancy. And then we go for the extra critical hit chance with crossbows, extra crit damage as well. And you use as many of the nodes you have left to go all the way here for that extra crit chance as well. All of this brings us to high velocity rounds having a 40% crit chance. It isn't great, and it would be ideal if I can kind of tinker with it just a bit, maybe have extra crit chance on my weapon that would boost it a decent amount, something like that. But, you know, if you can land it, it's going to feel great. If not, maybe you go through 2 cycles and it's not too big of a deal. Last but not least, gear, which is not ideal nor great at all. But we can take a look at it. We have a Desolate crossbow. This one, at the time, I bought it pretty early, and so we've been sitting on it for a while. And we're only using this weapon, by the way. I don't know if I mentioned it in the beginning, but you could min-max by having like a pure physical, you know, mod weapon on one side, and then, you know, something with like extra elemental percentage or increased elemental attacks on the other side. So you could try to do that, but usually if you just have a super high, you know, physical damage crossbow, it'll work because the beams on Galvanic Shards are 100% converted anyway. So this one, you got extra physical, adds physical damage, increased physical damage. It does have some lightning damage, which is unfortunately going to be irrelevant for high velocity rounds, but you definitely want the, obviously, +6 to level of all attack skills. That's the biggest one here. The other stats are bad, but it doesn't really matter because that's not what's boosting our damage. Obviously, again, that's why this isn't optimal. We put in the iron runes for physical damage. I'm not sure if the lightning damage, the flat lightning damage, works better for things like Galvanic Shards if you had mods that increase lightning damage, or elemental damage. But that's something I'll have to test in the future. For helmet, I mean, we're just kind of looking for, you know, balanced resistances, etc. If you can get gain deflection rating, that is going to be nice. We might have it on one more thing. Yeah, we have it on our boots as well. Here it's a tier 1, so that is nice. That all kind of evens out to an okay status for tier 15s, tier 16s. I mean, this is also where you're trying to get as much life as possible, right? So our body armor has 234 life. That's a big bulk of it. We just put in iron runes on both sides to maximize both evasion and armor, especially since we're going for hybrid armor here. We try to get as much chaos resistance. Again, the ring's not great, but chaos, evasion, it's got everything you need. Our amulet, also bringing a little bit of evasion. This is where also I'm taking as much life as possible. We do have Killer Instinct on here, which this I am also debating on switching. In fact, I should have already done it, but I forgot. So for now, this is the first thing I could kind of afford that, you know, had any use to me. So 40% increased attack damage when on full life. I mean, it's nice, you know, but during boss fights, especially because you're just going to be up there, you're just going to tank a lot of it, actually, just rely on the evasion. And try to get through it as fast as possible, unless it's a heavy attack from the boss. So what I will probably do is I'll probably actually get something that gives me more evasion here. I will most likely be switching it to Agile Succession. A little bit of cover that attack speed a little bit, and then 30% extra evasion rating if you hit an enemy recently, which you almost always will have. So I might switch to that, because I don't actually see the 40% damage really making a world of a difference, like, consistently on bosses, and it really doesn't matter for mapping because you're melting everything anyway. Take a little bit of the extra chaos resistance here, but honestly, again, just mix and match so you can get the life and resistances that you need. We don't have anything special here. You could specialize. This is why I keep saying this isn't optimal, because you can maybe work around some uniques. You know, you could really try to get some unique mods or something like that, desecrated mods, to add on to this, but this is as basic as can be. If you're curious about the stats, basically we have 2,300 life. Obviously, you would like a little bit more for sure, since we don't have any energy shield. And 50% evasion. I want to try to get this to 60%, but that's where we're sitting at. The armor, I wouldn't worry about that number. It's just kind of there because we have 2 hybrid. But it doesn't really matter. The only reason I went hybrid body armor is because if I'm going to go hybrid helmet, I might as well try to get a little bit of armor as a, just a tiny little bit, so I don't die to like mobs when I'm surrounded, and it has helped, I think, but I might switch back to full evasion one of these days if I can boost this up to like 60 or 70%. Max out resistances, you would want more, but for now I can work around this. Chaos maxes out once we get the charm through. And then deflection rating is also at 46%. So basically you have about a 50% chance to evade, but if you don't evade, you have a 50% chance to deflect, and that will prevent 40% of the damage done. So it's an extra safety net on that front. Honestly, if you're just kind of wondering, like, hey, I still want to play Witch Hunter, does Galvanic Shards still work, etc., this is just proof that it does. It's not the most exciting new thing. You know, you can separate it a little bit. Is it better than Galvanic Shards and just Shock Burst rounds? I don't know. Honestly, probably not necessarily. But this was just an experiment on could this work. It does. And from here on out, most likely what I will do is I will keep either Galvanic Shards or High Velocity rounds as my main damage. And then we'll do some crazy trees to maybe max out into curses or, you know, something like freeze and things like that. So I will be continuing to work on this slowly. Going to build up a couple other classes that I wanted to try out as well first. But stay tuned in the future for some wonky ideas. So that's going to be it for this one. Let me know down in the comments below what other crazy ideas you want to see from Witch Hunter builds, because we are committed to making sure people realize how fun the Witch Hunter can be. That's it for now. Hope you're all enjoying the new season. May you have amazing loot, and I will see you all next time.